single Tiger could obliterate enemy tanks from more than 2 kilometers away, with 100 millimeters of steel making its crew nearly invincible to Allied fire. Stories like Franz Staudegger's 22 kills in a day made the Tiger a legend, terrifying and seemingly unstoppable, the Wehrmacht's greatest tank. Yet behind every battlefield miracle, hidden forces quietly sealed its fate. What really made the Invincible Tiger lose the war? On paper, the Tiger was a machine built to dominate. Its main gun, the 88mm KWK-36, fired armor-piercing shells with a muzzle velocity of 800 meters per second. This weapon, borrowed from Germany's legendary anti-aircraft guns, could punch through 140 millimeters of steel at 1,000 meters. At 2 kilometers, it still destroyed enemy tanks before they could even return fire. Frontal armor was another leap forward, 100 millimeters thick, sloped and hardened, and it shrugged off most Allied and Soviet shells at typical combat ranges. Early in the war, no British or American tank gun could reliably penetrate a Tiger's front. Even the Soviet T-34's 76mm gun, feared in 1941, was outclassed by both the Tiger's reach and its protection. Crews inside spoke of a sense of safety, shielded by walls of steel that made enemy shots sound like pebbles on a fortress. For those facing it, the psychological effect was just as powerful. Reports spread among Allied troops of tanks vanishing at impossible distances, shells ricocheting harmlessly, and entire units halted by the mere rumor of a Tiger ahead. The legend grew, fueled by hard numbers and battlefield stories, turning the Tiger into a symbol of invulnerability long before most soldiers ever saw one. On the open plains near Kursk, the Tiger's reputation was forged not by rumor, but by the thunder of its gun. On July 7, 1943, SS officer Franz Staudegger and his crew faced a wave of Soviet T-34 tanks. The ground shook as the enemy advanced, numbers overwhelming, but Staudegger's Tiger waited at the edge of a wheat field. With each shot, the 88mm cannon found its mark. Soviet tanks erupted in fire one after another, caught before they could close the distance. Staudegger's Tiger held its ground for hours, outnumbered and isolated, yet untouched by return fire. By the end of the day, the field was littered with burning hulks. 22 T-34 tanks were destroyed in a single engagement. The Tiger's armor had turned aside every shell. Its optics and firepower had reached across the battlefield, striking with precision from beyond the range of its rivals. For the crews inside, the sense of invulnerability was real. For those outside, the Tiger became a specter, unstoppable, unbreakable, and deadly. Yet even as stories like Staudegger's spread, another challenge was gathering, one that could not be outrun or outgunned. On August 29, 1942, 4 Tiger tanks rolled off flat cars at the MGA rail station near Leningrad. The ground was soft, the air heavy with rain, and the roads ahead dissolved into a patchwork of swamp and forest. Major Richard Morker, commander of the 502nd Heavy Tank Battalion, had warned his superiors that these tanks were not ready for action here. He knew the terrain would swallow them whole, but the order from above was clear. The Tigers were to move out immediately, no matter the cost. The battalion diary tells the story in stark terms. Within hours, 2 Tigers sank deep into the mud, their interleaved road wheels choked and spinning uselessly. A 3rd Tiger suffered an engine failure, smoke curling from the hull as mechanics scrambled in vain. The 4th pressed on, only to sink into a bog beyond recovery. The crew had no choice but to abandon it. Not a single shot had been fired at them. No Soviet tank or anti-tank gun had even come into view. The Tiger's first day at the front ended with all 4 disabled, victims of the landscape, not the enemy. Morker's after-action report pulled no punches. He wrote that the Tigers would be lost without ever seeing combat. His warning had gone unheeded, buried beneath the urgency of Hitler's demand for a show of strength. The lesson was immediate and brutal. The Tiger's greatest enemy was not always another tank, but the ground beneath its tracks. For the men of the 502nd Heavy Tank Battalion, the myth of invincibility had already begun to crack, not under enemy fire, but under their own weight and the unforgiving Russian mud. January 1943 brought a new kind of disaster for the Tiger. Near Workers' Settlement No. 5, in the chaos of Operation Iskra, Tiger No. 100 broke down and was left behind. Its commander, Johannes Bolter, and his crew abandoned the vehicle without destroying it. The tank sat in the frozen landscape, engine dead, hatches open, manuals and technical documents still inside. Soviet recovery teams moved quickly, seizing both the tank and its paperwork. For German engineers, this was a nightmare realized. The most advanced weapon on the Eastern Front was handed over intact to the enemy. Soviet specialists dismantled the Tiger piece by piece. Every weld, every bolt, every page of technical documentation was examined and photographed. Reports from the GBTU, the Soviet Armored Vehicle Directorate, filled with sketches and measurements, and soon circulated among Soviet tank designers and artillery officers. They studied the interleaved suspension, the tolerances of the 88mm KWK-36, and the vulnerabilities of the drive system. Soviet engineers found the Tiger's armor impressive, but they also noted its weaknesses, especially the way mud and ice could jam its wheels and immobilize it in winter. The intelligence haul went beyond the Red Army. Details from the Tiger blueprints and performance sheets filtered out to Western allies through technical exchanges in 1943. The Allies now knew the Tiger's strengths, and more importantly, its limitations. The myth of the invincible tank began to unravel, not from the impact of enemy shells, but through the slow, methodical work of enemy engineers. Bolter's abandoned Tiger became a classroom for Soviet mechanics, a blueprint for countermeasures, and a warning to German commanders: mechanical failure could be as deadly as any enemy gun. 56 tons of steel and machinery. On the battlefield, the Tiger was a fortress. Off the battlefield, it was a logistical nightmare. Most European bridges in the 1940s were rated for 35 tons. The Tiger outweighed them by more than 20 tons, a fact that turned rivers and streams into major obstacles. German engineer corps scrambled to keep up, issuing special maps that marked the rare crossings strong enough to hold a Tiger's weight. These so-called Tiger-safe routes were few and far between, forcing units to detour for miles or risk disaster. The records tell the story. At least 20 Tigers were lost when bridges collapsed under their mass, sometimes dropping entire vehicles into water below. Crews barely escaped. To tackle water obstacles directly, early Tigers came equipped with a deep fording system, an ambitious engineering solution. Waterproof hatches, sealed engine decks, and a towering snorkel allowed the Tiger to wade through rivers up to 4 meters deep. But this system demanded more than 30 minutes of careful setup, with crews locking down every seam and hatch to keep water out. In theory, it turned the Tiger into an amphibious beast. In practice, the complexity and time required made it nearly useless under fire or during rapid advances. After the first 495 tanks, the deep fording kit was quietly dropped. German units found themselves relying on the landscape, not technology, to decide where Tigers could go. Every move became a calculation. Engineers walked ahead, testing bridges plank by plank, marking those that would hold and flagging those that would not. The Tiger's weight, once its greatest strength, became a constant threat, not from enemy guns, but from the ground and water beneath its tracks. Rail transport for the Tiger was an ordeal measured in hours, not minutes. The tank's combat tracks stretched 725 millimeters wide, too broad for the standard European rail gauge. Before every long-distance move, crews had to jack up the 56-ton vehicle, remove 8 outer road wheels from each side, and swap the wide tracks for 520mm transport tracks. Only then could the Tiger fit onto a flat car. The process left the tank completely immobile and vulnerable, often taking 6 hours or more, and had to be reversed at the destination. For mechanics and logistics crews, this was a race against time and exposure. Every hour spent on the rails or at a siding increased the risk of air attack or mechanical mishap. Once moving under its own power, the Tiger's appetite for fuel and maintenance became legendary. The Maybach HL-230 engine, a 700 horsepower V12 cylinder, struggled to push the enormous mass across open country. Its power-to-weight ratio stood at just 12.5 horsepower per ton, less than the American Sherman or the Soviet T-34. Off-road, the Tiger burned through 500 liters of fuel for every 100 kilometers. In practice, a single cross-country operation could drain its tanks in a matter of hours. But fuel was only half the battle. For every hour the Tiger spent in motion, it demanded up to 10 hours of maintenance. Mechanics tackled oil leaks, track tension, and constant breakdowns, often working through the night to keep just a handful of tanks operational. The Tiger's strength on the battlefield came at a cost measured not just in fuel and spare parts, but in lost time and exhausted men. Each move, each kilometer, was a drain on Germany's already strained supply lines. The Tiger's suspension was a marvel of engineering on the drawing board. Its interleaved road wheels, arranged in overlapping rows, spread the tank's immense weight across a larger surface, promising a smoother ride and better traction on firm ground. But in Russia's fields and forests, this precision became a liability. Mud, snow, and debris worked their way between the wheels, packing tight during the day's movement. As night fell and temperatures dropped, the soft mud hardened into ice, freezing the wheels solid. Crews woke to find their tanks locked in place, the entire suspension seized by nature's grip. Clearing the jammed wheels could take hours, sometimes more, forcing men to chip away at frozen mud with hammers and crowbars, exposed to the cold and enemy fire. Soviet commanders quickly recognized this flaw. Reports from the front describe a new tactic: attack at first light, when the Tigers were most likely to be immobilized by the overnight winter freeze. The Germans, for all their technical skill, could not out-engineer the Russian winter. Field diaries from heavy tank battalions document these struggles, entries noting tanks unable to move, crews spent on maintenance before a single shot was fired. The advantage of superior suspension turned into a trap, leaving Tigers helpless at the very moment they were needed most. This vulnerability was not just an inconvenience, it was a tactical weakness that could be counted on. The same design that gave the Tiger its steady ride in theory left it paralyzed when the ground turned against it. In the end, the Tiger's greatest strength on the blueprint became a predictable Achilles heel on the battlefield. Building a single Tiger tank demanded a scale of effort that strained even Germany's vast war machine. Each one required 300,000 man-hours to assemble, nearly 6 times the labor needed for an American Sherman. Factory ledgers from Henschel and Sohn recorded costs that started at a staggering 800,000 Reichsmarks per tank in the early runs, later dropping to about 250,000 Reichsmarks as production matured. Even at its cheapest, the Tiger cost more than double the price of a Panzer IV, and almost 3 times that of a Stu G3. The Panther, itself considered a complex machine, cost less than half as much to produce. Steel allocation told its own story. The raw materials for one Tiger could have built 21 field howitzers, weapons that could have equipped entire batteries. Economists in Speer's ministry tracked these numbers with growing alarm, watching as the Tiger's appetite for resources crowded out other weapons on the assembly lines. At its peak in the spring of 1944, German factories managed to turn out just 104 Tigers a month. For every one of these machines, thousands of workers and entire supply chains bent to the task, tying up the Reich's industrial might for a weapon that would always be rare on the battlefield. German industry delivered just 1,347 Tiger tanks between 1942 and 1944. Even at the height of production, Henschel's factories managed no more than 104 Tigers in a single month. On the other side of the front, Soviet factories rolled out nearly 50,000 T-34 tanks. American assembly lines produced a similar number of Shermans, almost 49,000. The math was brutal and unyielding. For every Tiger that left a German plant, dozens of Allied tanks rolled off lines elsewhere. The numbers did not lie. Even if a Tiger could destroy 10 enemy tanks before being knocked out, replacements arrived faster than German crews could reload. The battlefield became a contest of attrition, not just technology. The Tiger's legendary kill ratios could not keep pace with the relentless tide of Allied armor. In the end, the war was decided not by the best tank, but by the side that could build, supply, and replace faster than its opponent. The Tiger's rarity made it a legend and sealed its fate. On June 13, 1944, the quiet streets of Villers-Bocage in Normandy became the stage for one of the most famous tank duels of the war. SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann, commanding a single Tiger, spotted a column of British vehicles advancing through the town. Without waiting for support, Wittmann drove straight into the enemy's path. The Tiger's 88mm gun fired with surgical precision, knocking out Cromwell and Sherman tanks at close range. In less than 15 minutes, the British column was in chaos, burning tanks, crippled half-tracks, and crews scrambling for cover. By the time Wittmann withdrew, nearly 20 vehicles had been destroyed. The Tiger's armor shrugged off every return shot, while its firepower shattered the opposition. For a moment, the myth of invincibility seemed real, one tank halting an entire advance. Yet, even as Wittmann's name spread through German and Allied ranks, his feat stood as a rare exception. Few crews matched this level of skill or luck, and the Tiger's mechanical troubles and scarcity meant that stories like Villers-Bocage were the stuff of legend, not routine. The Tiger could be unstoppable in the right hands, but those hands were few, and the war demanded more than isolated brilliance. Today, the last operational Tiger sits behind museum glass, a silent testament to a weapon outmatched by its own ambition. Its legacy warns that no amount of firepower compensates for broken supply lines or impossible logistics. As armies still chase technological supremacy, the Tiger reminds us, wars are won by what moves, not just what destroys. The myth endures, but the lesson is sharper than steel. Share your thoughts below.